interesting story. When we became involved in the trucking business, it had to do with 9/11 and missing colleagues. So that's a hard thing, I think. But it ended up in a very nice business. We're very interested to hear from you, Peter, what you're going to say.
Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for coming on. I'm not going to be rude here, I'm not looking at my emails, I'm actually using this to advance my slides. So see if the technology holds up. We are a tech company, you've got to look at tech. So my name's Peter Thompson, founded CanTrack Global, or as it was known, Custodia Systems, 12 years ago. I'm sure some of you in this room, when I show you a few pictures, might even have seen or used some of our products. Changed the name to CanTrack last year because it was all getting a bit confusing, so apparently people can understand that we can track. So, okay, so what we're doing today in the presentation is having a look at tracking devices and what they mean in the modern context. And before I can kind of answer that question, I felt it was useful to maybe look a little bit back in history and examine some of the technologies that we still use in tracking, why they're relevant and how they came about in the first place. So tracking's always been a part of life. This is a man on the original tablet. You know, back then it might have been broken twigs or footprints in the floor, but we've used tracking to find out information that is important to us. So in this case it might have been finding out where your food was, but also maybe keeping an eye on those that thought that perhaps you were food. So tracking's gone back a long way and has its origins in everything we do. I'm not really going to go into the Ice Age, don't worry, it's not going to take that long. Actually, the next big advancement in tracking was World War II. So radio technology had been around for quite a while, but probably the late 19th century radio was first introduced. After the sinking of the Titanic, Marconi became the dominant radio firm as radio was put onto all shipping vessels around the world, and you were fined if you didn't have a permanent operator of radio. That technology by 1920 was firmly established, but in the war, the thing that advanced it really from our point of view and for law enforcement was the ability to start looking at tracking with radio. So we think of radio as something that goes through the air, it's kind of all around us, and indeed right now in this room we are absolutely inundated with various radio signals. But rather than it just being something that is everywhere, actually it comes from a very defined point in space, and obviously we can use that for tracking. This is one of the earliest versions of tracking. It's still one of the biggest. This was mounted into a van, much like the one you saw on the previous screen, and was used for doing direction finding of equipment. So all of this equipment here is evolution of that through World War II, and it was initially brought about to find where foreign troop deployments were. So at that point we had briefcase-sized radio transmitters that could transmit 500 miles. So they were obviously very important to find out where the troop placements were. But it moved forward a notch later in the war when actually they were brought into personal radio receivers, and they were looking to actually find particularly the resistance fighters who were using radio broadcasts for relaying Allied messages, but obviously of course for Allied propaganda, which they were keen to stamp out. So this unit here is one of the first miniature radio tracking pieces of equipment. It fits in a briefcase, carried by officers with a wire running up their arm and into an earpiece, so they could move the case around and find a localized source of radio transmission. This here is actually a Gestapo officer here with a piece of equipment that's actually mounted onto his body that would allow him to perform the same function without even having equipment in his hands, which is something I think my investigators would still like today. This is the modern equivalent, so we're probably all familiar with that. We do wildlife tracking, looks like the TV aerial on your house. It's called a dipole antenna, and effectively the signal from the radio reflects off the back antenna and back out onto the forward antennas and gives you a more accurate position. So radio tracking is actually exceptionally accurate in the right hands. You know, even at distance, at miles away, you can be looking just a few degrees either side of the radio source and pinpoint exactly what angle it's on. Which really takes it to the next bit, which is the first use of triangulation. So taking high ground, taking multiple sources of where the radio signal was coming from, they were able to use that to pinpoint the general area that something was in, and then going back to the slide before, pinpoint down to an exact house, basement, etc., about where the technology is coming. And this is still crucial technology within the law enforcement world. So taking that into a relatively modern time, this is a 1974 satellite, a US police cruiser, which is fitted out in undercover equipment. And you know, some of you here might even be experienced enough to remember the early radio transmitting and what it did for law enforcement. It was crude, it was very difficult to do at speed, but it gave you a tool that you'd never had before, i.e. allow it to keep sight or track an offender even when they were moving away from you. Still to this day, we don't really fancy doing real life sort of offender tracking in a vehicle using radio tracking. You prefer the target to be stationary. This is more modern, so this is what I started the business with 12 years ago. It's called the Apollo. Anyone in the room ever seen this before? Yeah, couple, three. There we go. So this was used extensively, certainly in the UK in law enforcement and in some other countries as well, particularly a few Scandinavian ones where the equipment originated. So this was, as a number of these tools were, this was originated as a hunting system. So it was actually very fond of their hunting over in Sweden, and this would be on the dog, used for pointing, barking. They could direct it and find out where they were on a big hunt. As you alluded to there, my background was actually working for an investment bank in London. And one of the things that happened post 9/11 was something called business continuity planning. And everyone suddenly realised what happens in a disaster of this scale. How do we track where our people are, what we're doing? So I was working with Vodafone in those days and established that we could actually get some form of location from people via their mobile phones. Paired that together with what I came across with this hunting device. They had a modem thinking, I can switch the beacon on and off, this is great. I looked at it and thought, we've got a tracking device here that there wasn't really anything else like it on the market at the time. Came along the next generation. Basically it's a slightly nicer reboxed version of what came before. And then we go to modern day now, which is something like this. This is our latest generation, got it last year. Actually this is a Danish company that produces it. We hold the license for this, and basically it's a modern version of all of that, but all of the technology is built in together. GPS, radio beacon, it's got LBS technology in there, a whole bunch of impact sensors, utilization monitors. I mean, the technology in 12 years has come on such an extent. So just a little bit about GPS. I know we all know roughly what GPS is, but it's quite an interesting way that this came about. In 1957, the Americans were absolutely crushed because the Russians had launched a satellite into space before they had. It was a big Cold War defeat. Sputnik was launched, and there was an upside though. The engineers at MIT, they noticed that every time Sputnik would circle over them in the States, there was a radio signal that came and it got louder when it was over them, and it got quieter when it was away. And they had a brainwave in 1957 and thought, if we knew where those satellites were, could we use that effect to find out our position on Earth? It's called the Doppler effect. And that's exactly what they did. It took them 30 years, launched a lot of satellites. By the mid-80s, they finally had a full network in place, the GPS network. And essentially it works the same way as it did now. In your vehicle or phone or anything else that's got satellite, we have something called a GPS almanac. It knows where the satellites are, it knows the atomic clocks on the satellite, time everything, and if you can see, the more you can see, the more accurate it is by measuring the power of the signal against the clock in it. That's what gives you the GPS position today. So it's a very cool bit of technology. In 1991, there we go, technology fail. There we go. There's our satellites now. There's something more like around 39 satellites, but they only need 24 to run the system, and they're just upgrading it at the moment. It's going to get even more accurate. But in the early 90s, GPS is very different to what it was now, and some of you may remember the US military purposely desensitized the GPS, so the position you get maybe would be 100 meters, 150. It was bloody useless as a sat-nav. And the reason for that was the Gulf War. In 1991, first time GPS was used in a military conflict, so people actually had these devices on them. The aim was to reduce blue-on-blue friendly fire, amongst the troops. And also it was used in things like missile guidance for the first time as well. So it was the first time it was used in anger. However, in 2000, they decided to actually lift the restriction, the decreased signal they put in place. And that's really when GPS took off as we know it today. Overnight, literally, the accuracy went from 100, 150 meters to maybe less than 20 meters. And it's the same signal we have today, except now the antennas, the receivers are so much more accurate that we're now getting down to less than 5 meters outdoors, and we're even to an extent being able to do some form of GPS positioning indoors. But indoors really is something we'll talk about in a bit, because that really is the one of the next big shifts in terms of tracking technology, where GPS will always be weak. These satellites are 20 kilometers in space on geostationary orbits, and their signal, I was told once an anecdote that seeing a GPS signal from a receiver is the equivalent to a 25-watt light bulb being seen at 1,000 miles with a pair of binoculars. That's the equivalent of strength of signal we're trying to receive with these things. So, location-based services. It's the third, it's the next big sort of technology really, and it's been around for a while. Those of you in law enforcement will be familiar. In the UK, we call it a RIPA request, and getting basic information on where a phone is. At the time, it was called location-based services because they felt that it was going to be a big enabler of services and functionality and things that never turned out to be true, if I'm honest with you. The basic premise of it is my phone right now is talking to a cell phone. They call it the serving cell. And that mast knows roughly where it is, because it goes, I know where I am, and I know how far I can broadcast, so you're somewhere within this circle. But my phone can also see other masts, and it says, well, I can see this mast and this mast. And you start overlaying them and lapping them until effectively, this is what a mobile provider is doing, is overlaying those circles in a rudimentary way to be able to give you an idea of where that phone is. This is a real example of a live job that we did last week actually in the UK for a stolen piece of construction equipment. The technology has come on a little bit now as well. You have something called timing advance. We've had it for a while, but it's getting better and better. It's the equivalent of a submarine sending out a sonar ping and timing the distance for it to come back, and that allows us to get really quite accurate distances from a receiver. I know you'll know further than this, and you'll know closer than this. On the left-hand side, you can see our estimations about where we felt that the stolen plant was. It had its GPS blocked. It was one of these little units here, so it couldn't get GPS, so we knew it was either being jammed by the thieves, which is a very common occurrence, or it was in a place where it couldn't receive GPS, and that means probably inside a metal and industrial unit or something else. The thieves are extremely adept at understanding how to block these signals. So we have GPS really now. It's kind of like for whenever it's not stolen. So for day to day, just to know where your kit is, it's great. We work on the assumption that in a theft, it will be blocked. The star on the right hand side shows the actual location, which on this map is right there. So you can see it is pretty accurate. We go in with that technology, turn on the transmitters, and then we do the last mile, as we called it, in this case a couple hundred yards, with a radio beacon. And it's still critical because you need to be able to go to a magistrate in the UK who's a civilian, and you need to be able to prove to them that the address you've given them is correct. So even if you know, well, it's in that building, or you think it's in that building, GPS alone is never enough. So if the GPS pointed you into the area, you have to be able to say it's that address. If you get that wrong, it's not going to be friendly times for you with the magistrate going forward. That was the job last week. Stolen van on stolen plates, stolen kit in the back, regular fine for us. Very often we find multiple stolen items at the same time, and you would not believe what these guys fit into vans. I've got thousands of photos like this. So, starting to get a little bit closer now to present day. LBS was dying 10 years ago. I mean, the networks had stopped spending money on it. The positions were getting no more accurate. The location-based services, well, there weren't any services. You know, there were visions years ago of people saying when you walk past the McDonald's with your mobile phone, it'll be able to send you an advert and go, come get your McDonald's voucher. It wasn't good enough for any of that. So people in our industry were getting a little bit concerned about whether there was any commercial future in our business model. Without the LBS, we couldn't do our job. And the network operators were seeing more and more risk associated with giving you mobile phone positions than there were any upside. There was no money in it for them. So in June 2007, June the 29th, a product came out that genuinely changed the entire market. I don't think anyone really credits how much this product changed the whole tracking industry. It put the dollar signs back in the eyes of the industry. Anyone got an idea what that product might be? You've all heard of it.
IoT?
No. Although it definitely made IoT stop becoming a talking point, and it made it enabled. Let's see if we get it as it starts revealing here. The original iPhone has done more for tracking and people like us than anyone can appreciate. So it was launched in 2007, as you all know. If I move forward and tell you why, the original iPhone had Google Maps. Since Apple's taken that off, Apple was a bit late to the party in understanding how important mapping was to the world and to its products. So they launched it with Google Maps. It was a last-minute addition. They didn't want to put it on there. The only reason they ended up putting it on there was because they needed something to showcase the technology. Before this, it was only a few bespoke phones like the Benefon that had GPS on them. This product had all the different location services. So if any of you remember when you first got an iPhone and you'd say, "Where am I?" most of the time you'd see this big circle here. That was for people that remember that. That was actually an LBS position. Now, you never see that anymore on modern devices, but in every single instance that you look at a map, and when you're not, when I'll tell you about that later, it's performing a position analysis on your VAR LBS all the time. But now it's done as a form of assisted GPS. So GPS doesn't know where it is on the planet. What this does is it say, you're in this ballpark area, and it makes it much faster to find a position from there. The next technology I still find really exciting, and I've been working with this for 5 years, and it's getting better and better, and it's Wi-Fi positioning. So Wi-Fi it's a really basic premise. So I'm right now connected to this hotel's Wi-Fi, so as long as I know where this hotel's Wi-Fi is, I know where you are. And that was, I'll talk about it more in a minute, because it's such an important change, and believe me, this is one of the big future technologies that's going to be incorporating. It already is. You're already seeing some indoor maps being provided, but Wi-Fi is going to provide highly accurate positioning, as in, tens of meters maximum and lower indoors in the very near future. And that has big applications for law enforcement and tracking as well. What we really tend to see though on our phones when we look now is just GPS, and we expect it and we take it for granted. And the quality of GPS receivers are really good, but in the background, every time you see that dot, you've got LBS and you've got Wi-Fi contributing to it being so quick. So, Google, they embarked on the single biggest mapping project since the Ordnance Survey. What they did has just changed so much about our lives that this single thing really, I don't think. It is also appreciated how much Google have done on a global scale. There's not many people that could have done what they did. And we all know what streetcars were used for, right? Yeah, Street View. So there's the CanTrack offices in glamorous Milton Keynes. But they did more than that. And some of you may remember, but Google are probably happy you don't remember just how much of an outrage they caused with the next part of this is they weren't just mapping. They were sniffing your Wi-Fi. So they had special technology that sat within the vehicle. They knew exactly where the vehicle was. And as they drove down the street, they mapped every single street from start to finish. And at the same time, they mapped where your Wi-Fi was. So they knew where they were, they knew where the Wi-Fi was, and they collected the world's first complete Wi-Fi network. And this is what that looks like if you want to look at a Google map with a Wi-Fi data layer enabled on it. It's staggering. To give you an example, there's probably 11 to 14 million mobile hotspots in the UK, GSM towers. There's more like 25 million Wi-Fi hotspots. And we're getting more and more connected. So you can see the relevance of this in terms of where we're going forward in the tracking. This is the future. These are all points of reference that we can use and tap into, and in fact we are. And this is where the Internet of Things starts becoming a reality. I don't know if you've heard of this Internet of Things. We've all heard about our fridges, talking to Tesco and all that stuff. We've been talking about it for 10 years, but it's happening. You know, you've seen the Amazon dash buttons, anyone? You stick a Persil button on the front of your washing machine, and when you need some more washing powder, you just press the button on your washing machine and it goes on your Wi-Fi and it tells you. This is the Internet of Things, and tracking is taking that forward. That's a product now. So, obviously the question you're going to be asking is, you know, Google had to go out and say immediately, we're not doing this anymore, because people were very upset that they were taking their Wi-Fi data. They also inadvertently caught sensitive data, emails, passwords, etc. So Google came out, big apology, don't worry, we're not doing that anymore. You know why? Because they don't need to do it anymore. Because they're gathering that data all the time, every day, from everybody in this room. And this is a good example of how they're doing that. On the right there's a major road. We all use traffic, I imagine, on maps. This is green, there's traffic cameras on that road, and we know how it gets that data. Has anyone ever seen something like this? This is a very small local road, I know it well, it's got no cameras, doesn't even have much traffic. And yet here's an instance where Google is quite accurately telling you there's traffic on that road and where there's traffic. So the reason they can do that is because of these. Because all the time, every one of you acts as data gatherers for Google, for Apple, whoever. All of your operating systems are continuously tracking you and your movements. Has anyone recently upgraded to iOS 10 on their iPhone? Yeah? Were you surprised the first time you got out of your car and it said you've just parked your car and I've marked it on the map for you?
Exactly, yeah.
How the hell did you do that? Yeah, well the reason it can do that is because it has very sophisticated algorithms within the phone, within the motion detector on the phone. It knows whether you're walking, cycling, riding a motorbike, driving a car, running. It knows exactly what you're doing and it knows where you're doing it. And it uploads all that data all the time in the background. And you've all signed the permission that says you're happy for it to do it. Because you haven't, you wouldn't be able to use your phone. And that data is worth a lot of money, and that commerciality is why we're back in the room talking about exciting tracking technology, because someone's got to pay for this gear. And if that hadn't have happened, the toys we'd have to play with now would be pretty similar to what they were 10 years ago. These devices have changed a lot. Some of it good, some maybe not so. Probably not happy being data gatherers, are you? So, sorry, someone's got to pay for my plane flight. This is for the tax man, so I'm going to just bear with me. So it leads us into the products that we have now. We have three main streams. So we have our tiny little GPS products here for tracking people, lone worker, man down. We have the asset technology, which is unbelievable. It's kind of, I'll show you more on the next slide, but it's a very robust bit of kit that's got all these features built in. And we have the vehicle type of stuff as well. This isn't a sales pitch, so I'm going to go quickly over it. I like this slide just purely because this is what we can do now. This is it being run over by a 1.25 ton Bomag roller whilst lying on the ground, and it lifts the roller clear off the floor, and that unit still works. I have it in my office in the UK. And it does that because it's filled with epoxy resin. It's potted solid. It's got impact sensors, tamper, light alerts, the first unit that can spot a thief before the thief spots the unit, and a bunch of other information, including runtime hours, which people in construction find really useful. Stick a unit on it, it tells you how many hours it's run so they can service it. There you go, that's the commercial bit out of the way. Had to do that. Okay, up to the future. So this is the question that you were hoping to get answered. What is tracking in the modern context? Well, obviously we know there's tracking devices, so we know what they do and what they are. We now know that our phones are probably one of the most, well, not probably, is the most common hardware form of tracking that's out there. Wearables, increasingly coming into play now, so things like Fitbit, the Apple Watch, they've all got GPS built into them. Even if they don't have GPS, they still can get used for tracking as well. We've got your cars. All the manufacturers are now building this kit in to the cars at point of manufacturer. Where's the relevance for people like myself who might make a specific kit when the cars are already coming with it in? NPR, moving into a slightly different form of tracking, but an extremely effective tool that you're well aware of. Laptops can track them via an IP address or via Wi-Fi, as I've just shown you. CCTV, loyalty cards, thought of those as tracking devices. One of the best forms of tracking devices. In fact, I was sitting with some police officers yesterday and they're telling me an excellent story about how on a key fob of someone who was buying burner phones, so pay-as-you-go phones that they can throw away after using them in criminal activities. This guy's keyring had a Tesco Club Card loyalty card on it. And I went into Tesco and said, what can this card tell you? And I said, well, everything. You come and bring the warrant that allows you to look at it, Data Protection Authority, and I'll tell you what's happened. And lo and behold, on his Tesco Club Card, 12 burner phones bought. And they were to track him down with that. But all of these things are designed to track you. And there's many more besides. Cookies on your computer, barcodes, iris scanning, facial recognition, and then probably these are all here now, okay, you'll be aware of them, but they're being used already. Banks are using facial and eye recognition to transfer money at the high end of the market. Employee cards, I don't think of those are tracking devices, but they are. They don't just give you access to doors, they track where you're going, they give an audit trail of where you've been. Even when I was working in banking 20 years ago, we were using these cards in certain areas of the banks, using induction loops in the walls just to track where people were, not just for the door opening. So we knew whether they'd been into an area that they were authorised to go into, or whether they'd potentially broken the law by going onto the trading floor if they're a banker, for example. But here's the one that's probably caused a huge change in the way that we gather intelligence. Brilliant tracking tools is social media. Fantastic what criminals are prepared to go advertising about their lives on the internet. And these are tools that are increasingly being used. So the question really I'd ask you is what isn't tracking as opposed to what it is and what it will be? Everything you do is tracking. So we know what a tracking device is. It's a device that's designed to perform a specific role. It has specific attributes, maybe homing beacon or maybe certain sensors. It's designed for that certain information. But there's a whole other type of tracking that I'm alluding to really, which is what we call location-aware devices. And I was trying to figure out a way of explaining this to you the other day when I was sitting on my sofa at home. I've taken a photo of my TV stand. Here I have a TV, Blu-ray player, a skybox, a BT broadband, and an amplifier. Every single one of those knows where it is. Every one. But not just that, the people that made them know where they are too. The answer is probably obvious by now, but this is the biggest driver of tracking for us, and this is the future. That's why they track us. Who you are, where you go, what you buy, what you do, what you look at. They know everything. All that is happening in your lives these days is they're gathering. There's so many of us that they don't know any other way to do it. So the personalisation of shopping is what people are trying to achieve, and that can only be achieved by computers. They're completely impersonal, tracking everything that you're doing. And so, for example, you'll probably know that within shops, they are monitoring the flow of people and how they move around the shop, and they use that to decide what the premium product placement is. So I know that I want my product to be on that aisle at that point in the shelf because it gets great floor traffic. But now it's going a step further. I mean, this is already well into trials. Now that they're actually looking at what you're looking at. I want to see where your eyes go, what catches your eye, what products you like, what colours make you buy. Facial recognition, that's old hat. You know, the newer CCTV tracking is just, it will know it's me if I walk away from it because of the way I walk. It can use my walking like a fingerprint. These are all tracking tools that are out there and working right now. So in terms of the technology itself, what's holding it back? It always comes down to batteries for technology. What we can do in terms of the chipset that's inside those units there, they're tiny. All the space is taken up by the battery. And there's some very exciting advances coming in battery power that will enable us to create some really cool devices. And in particular, the Internet of Things that Arnie mentioned there, that is becoming a genuine sort of reality now because they've got low power devices that also, combined with the other thing that's holding it back, which is how they communicate, the advances in communication is really about to take a major step forward, and people call it the Internet of Things, but LoRa, Sigfox, you may have heard of these technologies. They're low power, they're more like pager networks. So you need fewer masts, very high power in terms of the broadcasting range, but they're very easy on battery for the devices. The one I'm putting my money on is narrowband IoT, because the mobile phone networks have invented it. Because these guys aren't the mobile networks, and they've suddenly gone, oh my god, wait a minute, we're about to lose millions of devices off the networks, we've got to come up with an idea pretty quick. Narrowband IoT is a technology that I think will be powering a lot, especially tracking devices, but also any Internet of Things technology around the home. In terms of software, privacy maybe? I mean, what's stopping apps, cookies? Okay, privacy perhaps, and really open source. Who has access to the data? How do you access? Part of the reason this is commercial data, and the reason you might struggle as a law enforcement officer is that they don't want to give you the data. It's their data, and it's worth money. And more than that, they probably don't want you to know to the extent of what data they have about you. So for location aware specifically, connecting a very large series of dots, I could literally, if I had access to all those sources of data together, I could track you from the moment you got up, what time you got up, every single one of your movements, all the way through to you went to bed, with a complete picture of it. But it's hard to get that picture together. My phone tells me what time I went to bed and woke up. I'm not quite sure how it does that yet. I'm guessing it's movement, but you know, advertising is what's pushing this forward. But you know, I just wanted to make the distinction here, because we've got tracking devices, but the future isn't really, for me, in tracking devices in the main. In fact, I think some companies like us have some big concerns in the future. An interesting slide really in terms of about the multimedia, about the social media specifically. So when challenged, social media as evidence for search warrants holds up in court 87% of the time. The judges are prepared to accept social media as evidence. And all of these different things they do, from identify associates linked with persons of interest to identify criminal activities, soliciting tips on crimes. There's all sorts of data in there that's available, but yet again, it's about accessing that data, how it's kept safe, and how you guys actually get access to it, or the police as well. So Internet of Things, a couple of quick examples on this. This is really happening. Mercedes have just launched a few weeks ago a new sort of stand in Germany. They basically said that they have a technology now that is coming in that allows the trucks to start talking to other devices. So while other manufacturers are talking about it, Mercedes are doing it to the extent where if a truck's going around a corner, it will know that the light's red, so it will start applying the brakes then, as opposed to slam them on at the last minute. The idea of road trains coming into existence, this is all backed by tracking technology and the Internet of Things. It's driving it forward. Amazon Dash I was talking about as well. The connected cars, that's a big way forward. There was a friend of mine who's a developer, and he told me a story about Nissan Leafs recently, and you guys probably know about this, and I know certainly there's some people out here that would, but this guy basically figured out how to get into the tracking software that's built into a Nissan Leaf using nothing other than the VIN number on the front of the vehicle. And by going through the API, which had no security in it at all, basically, he was actually able to plot on a map the location of every Nissan Leaf in any country in the world. You know, there's some pretty serious criminal implications, and he actually found out a way of backward working out what the VIN number was through this API. So he could do it. It started off in one way, and it got to the point where he could control the vehicle, he knew where it was, and he could find out his VIN number. Now, he obviously released this in advance to Nissan, gave them fair warning and 6 months to sort it out, which they duly did, but it does highlight the dangers of the amount of technology and tracking that we're kind of giving up to people. So in terms of the future for physical devices, I still think they have a future. There is still specific requirements. I think for the people sitting in this room, products like ours over there for the asset tracking are very relevant. They will continue to be relevant in the future, even though location aware, without a doubt, is where the future is going. Location becomes metadata. It's not a device in its own purpose, it's just part of the data that we're gathering all the time. Telematics will be the preserve of manufacturers. So, part of my business is doing live vehicle tracking. It's not a business I expect to retire on, that's for sure, because it's only going to be a decade at the most where I'm going to continue making devices that are relevant. And some of the clever manufacturers are going, wait a minute, we need to go and start talking to the car manufacturers and saying, for an example, this is a Mercedes powered by a Thompson, because what future have they got otherwise? And that's why in our asset market it's going to be a key area for us. But really that will move to software as a service. That's what tracking will be in a lot of cases in the future. It will be extracting the tracking information from the software, the cookies, the phones, the commercial providers, and that's what I think law enforcement needs to work on getting better agreements with the private companies that are holding the keys towards data. That needs to be the future. And that's it. Has anyone got any questions?
When does LoRa start?
So LoRa it's already trialed. It's already in a couple of places. It's in a couple of major cities like Birmingham, for example. Very quick to deploy. They needed about 6 antennas to do the whole of Birmingham. Took them a matter of a week or two. So they're pushing it out quite quickly. I don't think they'll end up winning the day, but they're certainly bringing it out now. And devices need to have LoRa enabled to work.
What will be the solution for GPS and GSM jamming?
There isn't one. So, not in terms of the GPS itself. So, because it's so weak a signal, it's so easy to jam. GSM's harder because it's ground-based, the radio signal's emitting from the device, and something that, like the homing beacon itself, is almost impossible to jam. So, what we'll need to do is find other means. So, when you go in a tunnel in your car and the sat-nav carries on, it looks like it's working. Whereas if we did that 10 years ago, the car would start spinning around and driving into a lake. It now knows where it is because it's got a gyroscope in it that says, I know that I'm still driving in this line and therefore I'm just going to pretend I know and hope at some point I pick it up later. And so you'll see a certain amount of that come through, but as long as you rely on a wireless signal, at the moment I can't see how they'll stop that. But it will come, and the answer probably lies back to power again. If you can overpower something with a certain type of signal, then maybe that's a future forward. But these gyroscopic sensors are very clever. We've been developing algorithms on this unit here that detects the range of motion. So for example, the same way as Apple's detecting whether you're running or walking, we can put that on the boom of a machine and we can tell you whether the machine's driving or whether it's digging dirt. And that's a technology we're quite excited about and driving forward, but there is no easy solution to that. But what you can do is detect jammers are in use. So on all of our equipment, our customers don't see this, but all of our live GPS tracking, because of our other hat being the security side, we have jamming detection enabled on every unit we've got going around the UK and Europe. And honestly, you would be shocked if you saw how many times we're getting jamming activations trigger on our units. They are all the time. The amount of jammers that are already in use are staggering, absolutely staggering. In fact, I would go as far as to say, as if you ever are working on live jobs or you're in law enforcement and you drive near to a vehicle and your sat-nav starts losing its signal or going a bit funny, you might want to take a closer look at what's around you and who's got a reason to start jamming stuff.
Could you say a few words about how this narrowband IoT is working and the Sigfox and how is it working?
It's still a radio signal, but it's the wavelength of the radio signal that makes it able to better penetrate buildings, glass, metals. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that normal mobile phone signals couldn't get through a glass building very well. And so it's got a wavelength that better penetrates, and it does it at a fairly low power. So it's going to be very important for being able to track items indoors when criminals take vehicles into shipping containers and buildings, etc. I can talk to you more about it afterwards. It's probably quite a big discussion, that one, but it's a very good future. Narrowband IoT is the one less people have heard of, and the one that I would say is worth your research if you're looking into the tracking part. Pick it up with the articles. Any questions at all?
Do you get any inquiries from law enforcement agencies for data in relation to your own company about clients' data? Are you beginning to see an increase in that, or?
In our market, no. I know people in our industry and I know because of the clientele they're selling to, they are typically either selling to people on the right side of law enforcement or criminals, and their business is probably 50-50 mix of the two. And I think it's a very dangerous space to operate in because they have two people that knock on their door on a regular basis, which is the police with a warrant, and the criminal saying, you say anything to the police with that warrant and I'm going to kill you. And they're putting themselves in that situation, and we really don't. So, you know, we get involved obviously at the criminal side when we're recovering equipment, but I think twice in 12 years we actually testified to the data as opposed to our actual actions at the end. But I can certainly see what you're talking about when you look at location-aware devices. That is going to be a massive jump in the future. But we've already done the job by recovering it by the time the police are asking us, so it's slightly different for us. But that's a good question. Yes.
Hi. Are you installing your own units, or are you having them installed by others?
So all of our kit is plug and play. So with these kit, we all have 3M adhesive pads with everything. You rip the pad off, you stick it on. This one allows you to bolt it on with security bolts if you want a special fit. But ultimately, they do it themselves. Even our vehicle kit is plug and play at the OBD port. So we've tried to get away from installation engineers. With the larger companies that have got more types of equipment, we do an onboarding and test it with them. But we're very keen to keep the variety of locations as high as possible. That's one of the biggest downfalls, is having static locations.
Whilst in the field, one thing that we identify is that they give you scan, they give you found very, very easy.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is that your units? Are you saying
that can't be scanned? It's not even on most of the time. It's got exceptionally low voltage. So the way we will scan for equipment, as you well know, is the same way as you check a wall before you put a drill bit in it. When you're doing some DIY, you get an electrical tester, you scan. When a vehicle is switched off, there's one hotline that's running, and that's your tracking device. You just find where the device is and pull it out. You can't do that with this from electrical testing, and from a signal point of view, the only time is when it's actually active. So it's like catching a submarine by studying the water for popping its periscope up.
Does it have a SIM card inside?
No. But the first tracking device not to have a SIM card, it's got an eSIM in it.
An eSIM?
eSIM that is quad band, global roaming SIM. If I drop it, previously if I did that, have you ever done that with a mobile phone? You might have found that you can't get a signal anymore. And the reason being is one of the SIM card contacts has popped off and you have to restart your phone. You couldn't really do that because it's a solid block of epoxy resin. So we had to incorporate eSIM, which you'll see in all your phones and devices in the next few years, and it provides you that protection.
We've actually just come across an organised crime group who've got this new detection tool which they're scanning vehicles with.
Yeah.
Even with sleepers, in effect, is what we're now, like you're using there, define them as called sleeper units.
Yeah.
The sleeper units now can be detected, and that's the one thing we're trying to find. The latest product now is something to counteract that, which can't be scanned even when they're on.
I'd love, if you've got access to equipment, I'd love you to test it with ours and see what you find on it. I'd rather know about it and prepare for it. The current is so exceptionally low, the only thing it's powering is a very tiny processor and the movement sensor. The movement sensor on our device, that unit there, that small one, will give you upwards of 7 years battery life. And the big brother that's twice the size, 15 years. And the whole time it's powering a movement sensor. It's the only thing that remains active. So we detect utilization when it was used 9:26 to 10:30 or whatever. So it's a great surveillance tool without constantly being on the network. And it only transmits the data once a day. So it records it all, then transmits it. I think I'm probably running over, am I? No, are we okay? Is there any other questions, anyone at all? Oh, you've been a really good audience. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much.